Good evening, and welcome to Skep Talk, the monthly speaker series hosted by the Bay Area Skeptics. Before tonight's presentation, a few words about Bay Area Skeptics. As North America's oldest skeptical organization, we are dedicated to promoting critical thinking, logic, and rational thought. In the 1970s and 80s, scientists such as Carl Sagan and magicians such as James Randi established the scientific skepticism movement out of concern about the popular fondness for pseudoscience and the lack of public science literacy. Scientific skepticism embraces evidence-based civil discourse on health, education, consumer protection, and especially the investigation of extraordinary claims. Using the scientific method, we hope to promote skeptical inquiry to reduce irrational thinking in society. This talk is supported by Bay Area Skeptics members such as you. Please visit us at baskeptics.org or join us on Facebook, Twitter, and Meetup. Consider supporting us through convenient monthly donations via Patreon. Patrons receive premiums such as discounts and free t-shirts for our annual Skeptical Conference. But more importantly, members help us make the world just a little more reasonable and rational. And now, tonight's speaker.
Hello again. This is Bill Patterson for the Bay Area Skeptics, and I have the pleasure of hosting tonight's Skep Talk. Our speaker for September Skep Talk is an old favorite, a longtime friend of the Bay Area Skeptics, and a former presenter and Skepperty contestant. We'll talk more about that later. His career has been varied and involved with interests spanning both art and science. He first became known in his native Australia, there's a hint, for one of my loves, origami, the Japanese art of paper folding. He has invented numerous figures and indeed has over 20 publications on that subject to his credit. At some point, like many of us, he was amazed by James Randi and decided to involve himself in the skeptical movement, which he did with a vengeance. To that end, he starred as the skeptical judge on 2 seasons of the television show The One, the search for Australia's most gifted psychic. He also was involved in the James Randi $1 million challenge. A life member and former president of the Australian Skeptics, he's been heavily involved with The Skeptic magazine, the Aussie version of The Skeptical Inquirer. He's traveled all over the not-so-flat earth, speaking on various topics in the skeptical realm, including spoon bending, water divining, firewalking, etc., and is a sought-after personality for conventions and lecture series events, including the Amazing Meeting in Las Vegas, SciCon, and DragonCon, just to name a few. Some of his tireless work helped to expose the fraud of the so-called power balance bands, those bracelets frequently seen on the wrists of professional golfers, which claim to adjust the body's energy. I don't know why he thought that was so far-fetched. In 2010, he helped to organize the first Amazing Meeting Australia. He also founded Sydney Skeptics in the Pub. A fellow for the American Committee of Skeptical Inquiry, formerly SciCop, he also hosts the Skeptic Zone weekly podcast, which now boasts 674 episodes and is still going strong with new content every week. He's a frequent guest on other podcasts as well, including The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, Skepticality, the Amateur Science Podcast, and many others. People, please, let's welcome the one, the only, Richard Saunders. Hello, good evening, Richard.
Hello, Bill. I think I have to have a lie down now after that introduction.
I'm sorry, we have to close things up now. So
yes, it was a pleasure being with you tonight, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. That was a very kind introduction. Thank you.
Well, it's all true. It's just the facts, man. Just the facts. So Richard, it is such a pleasure to have you on again and again and again. But anyway, what do you have for us tonight?
Tonight, we're going to be looking into the future, or are we? Tonight, folks, I'm going to be talking about something I've been involved with now for well over 10 years, which is the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project. And I can see our tech person is just busily behind the screens, making sure that you can see the presentation. I hope that's ready to go, and there it is. The Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project is probably one of the most important things I'm doing in the skeptical realm at the moment. I've done lots of other things, as was mentioned before. I've done video documentaries about water divining. I collated all the copies of the magazine, The Skeptic from Australia, onto a CD many years ago, which was a sort of a first. But this one is particularly interesting because one of the great claims of seers and psychics and mystics to this very day is that they can somehow peer into the future and relay future events to us here in the present. So the Great Australian Prediction Project, and it's very important that I make this case, as many people think what I'm doing is trying to debunk psychics and whatever. No, it's really the mission is not to debunk them who say they can see the future. It's a mission to see whether they can see the future. So this started out as just marking the homework of psychics, so to speak. But the chips will fall where they may. If it turns out after cataloging and analyzing predictions that it appears that certain psychics are on to something, then that's what we'd have to report. So it's an investigation. It's not a debunk. What the results are can speak for themselves, but that's very important to state right up front. People being able to tell the future, it's been claimed it's been really going around for thousands of years, probably longer, as long as our species has been around, mystics looking into the future. More recently, as these newspaper clippings will tell you, it seems to me that it's been a darling of the media. And every year the media will publish what they think are magical predictions coming up. They'll interview a local psychic or the psychic will contact them. There's some from the past. Gloomy predictions around the world for 1993 and so on. Lots of talk about Nostradamus. This is nothing new. But when I was doing lots of research for this project, I discovered something very interesting. Now, this project is concentrating on the years 2000 to the year 2020. So it's our best efforts to collect, catalog, and mark every published psychic prediction made in Australia, because I had to set the boundary somewhere, by psychics in Australia, be that television, newspapers, radio, what have you. And it's very important that we set boundaries on this. So, but I did find something very interesting. And I don't know if you can see, there we go, that during my many excursions into various online archives, I discovered that the Bay Area skeptics were doing something very similar a very long time ago. Look at that. The psychics bomb out with predictions for 1990. And this was work done at the time by the Bay Area skeptics in 1990. So in that era, and it turns out for many years, the Bay Area skeptics were collecting at least some psychic predictions, marking their homework and letting the press know, which is fabulous. That there was a group, and it was fabulous that it's the Bay Area skeptics doing this so long ago. And there's another example. 1991. And I won't read that out to you now, but I think you get the idea. The unfortunate thing is that the media love to put something like the word scoff. You can see the word scoff up there. So skeptics scoff at failed predictions, which is not what we want to portray. We don't set out to scoff at failed predictions. What we should set out to do is simply catalog and see what happens when we look at all the predictions, what the results are. Skeptics scoff at failed predictions sort of paints it like we've set out to scoff at them right from the start, and that's really not the spirit of it, so to speak. So here in Australia, I don't know what it's called in the United States, it might be called something similar. In the summertime, which is our December, January, it's called the silly season. Things sort of wind down for the summer break. And where you are in North America, of course, it's mid-year. It's the vacation season. Well, here it's over the Christmas time, which is our summer. And it's a great time for TV shows to try and fill up their content. And come December, you'll often get psychics appearing on morning chat shows to give their psychic insights for the coming year. There's a bit of sport around in summertime in Australia, and all the politicians have gone home. The parliament's in break. The prime minister's having a holiday. So usually there's not a lot of news going on. So that's one source of content for this project. I can collect these videos, and we'll get to that in a minute. But really, where this project started off here in Australia, for many years, there was a publication called the Psychics Directory, which came out once a year, and they would, in the pages of this magazine, have a segment which was called Tomorrow's News Today or something like that, where they would publish a page of or 2 or 3 pages of the top psychics in Australia giving their predictions for the coming year. I've got every copy of that magazine over there in my archive. So I was able to use that as the start off point. Because they're published predictions, I could wait for the end of the year, go back and see how many of those predictions came true. And it doesn't matter if you can't see that exactly, but that's just an example of how it works. You'd have usually celebrities, usually celebrities. What will happen with this celebrity? What will happen with that celebrity? There's President Obama, there's the Queen. You sort of get the idea. This will happen, this will happen. This psychic says, look out for this thing going to happen. The other huge source of content for this project have been what we loosely call in Australia women's magazines. These are gossip magazines. The 2 biggest ones are called Woman's Day and New Idea. Both these magazines have been roundly criticized for basically publishing anything. It doesn't have to be true. A lot of what they publish is sensational. For example, that one on the right there, World Exclusive Divorce, Why Charles Was Forced to End It All. They just make it up. But for years and years, these magazines have carried psychic predictions. I think they know their audience. So in order for me, when it dawned upon me that this project should have a big scope in order to make the results meaningful, I would need to go through and find the predictions in both these magazines over the years. And originally I thought I would just try to find old copies and collect some. But then, of course, it struck me, no, if I had to do it properly, if I wanted to do this properly, I had to look at every issue of that magazine. In that case, it's the Woman's Day magazine. And where are they? They're not online. They're in the State Library of New South Wales here in Sydney. So for week after week, I'd go to the State Library. I'd give them a little ticket which said, I request that you get out of your storage this volume, this volume, this volume. And there you can see the results, which meant that then I had to go through every magazine for 20 years, page by page. Flip, flip, flip. Here's the psychic predictions. Photograph it, come back later on and enter that information into the catalogue. So I spent many weeks here in Sydney going through every issue of that magazine. It was just, what an experience that was. The other magazine, New Idea, is not held, the physical copies are not held here in Sydney. They're held in the city of Melbourne in Victoria, the state of Victoria. So about 2 years back, I traveled to Victoria and I spent a week with my good friend Steve Roberts, who's a well-known skeptic here in Australia and Victoria, in Melbourne. And every day we went into the State Library of Victoria. We requested the volumes, and there you can see some of the volumes that they returned to us. And again, we went through every issue page by page. The best part about that was we'd spend all morning going through issues, finding predictions, then having a huge lunch, staggering back somehow, spending the rest of the afternoon going through predictions, going back to Steve's place and opening a bottle of red. So, searching, doing research into the paranormal can be a lot of fun sometimes, I promise you. And there are some examples of what we got. They're direct photographs from the pages of these magazines. And you can see, or you almost can see, but take my word for it, they're all celebrities. Very rarely will you get other things. You get royals, you get celebrities. You might get something to do with natural disasters in these particular magazines, but their stock and trade is celebrities. That's what people read this magazine for. So, of course, there are thousands of predictions to do with famous celebrities. So I'm going to play a little video now. This is what I was discussing before of, and this goes for a couple of minutes, of one of the psychics in the database who is a regular every summertime here in Australia to turn up on TV, the morning chat shows mostly, and give predictions for the coming year. And this is a flavor of what it's like. So let me do that, and hopefully that will play for you.
From beauty trends to money matters.
Oh, it's over. In our heads, it's over.
We'll share that later. This week, we've been looking ahead to 2013 to see what's in store.
Yes, now celebrity psychic Mitchell Coombs is using his powers of prediction and gaze into the future. That's what he's doing with his powers. Let's see what he sees happening for us in the new year. It's quite a long intro.
Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here. Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here.
Brace yourself. In 2013, we're in for radical change, medical breakthroughs, and new discoveries. Numerologically speaking, we are moving into a number 6, universal year, which is all about friendships, home, family, and stability in our lives. And this ties into the Mayan calendar in 2013. We're letting go of old thoughts, old beliefs, old ways of doing things in favor of improving the qualities of our lives, both locally and also globally.
We're being warned that this summer will be one of the hottest and driest we've seen in years.
We're going to continue to see and experience a lot of erratic weather patterns. And I'm most worried about the East Coast because I do feel the East Coast will probably be on the receiving end. I do feel that we will experience some of the hottest days on record in many, many years. Economy-wise, 2013 is definitely a year where we find our situation. That said, if you do have stocks in the stock market, be very careful around the months of March or April because there may be minor setbacks that could really cause long-term problems for you if you're not too careful with your investments. Real estate will boom in the first half of 2013, but during the second half, for first home buyers, it will become increasingly difficult to purchase a first home. But over the next 10 years, this marks the cycle where we start to find that we just can't afford to buy anymore. We will be a renting nation. When we go to voting booths, both Julia Gillard and Tony Abbott will go head-to-head in spectacular ways. And whilst I'd never rule out that Tony Abbott would never serve a term in government, I've got to say I feel that Julia Gillard will be elected for a third term. And at the time of recording these predictions, I'm picking up that it will be her strongest term yet. So brace yourself, there are fireworks. Moving on now to the royal family, I see a baby wrapped in a blue silk blanket, but it's interesting because around Kate and Wills I see the number 2. So I do question if there would actually be, I wouldn't say it was twins, but I do have to wonder this. I do feel there are 2 children around them, both a boy and a girl. Oddly enough, I'm not picking up too much around Charles and Camilla. That said, I do feel that Charles will be bypassed and William would ultimately be crowned king if it came to that decision. The Queen has quite good health. However, in terms of Philip, I do get very worried around him for October and November, when again, we may see some health complications around him. Everybody will be talking about Harry's love life in 2013, and I actually feel that in the middle of the year, we are going to see a woman with darker hair, striking eyes around him, and although she seems very mysterious, she seems to remind me very oddly of Kate Middleton. Let's talk about celebrities now.
We hereby declare this Hugh Jackman Day in Hollywood.
He's a golden guy. Whatever he touches, he will just turn to gold. This year, I really feel that his hopes, dreams, and ambitions are perfectly in harmony and in line with his absolute true potential. So we really are going to see some amazing magic being made by Hugh. Although it may have been a bumpy year initially for Danny Minogue, it definitely is a time now where it is out with the old and in with the new.
And it's hard to bring
We see Danny moving forward in leaps and bounds. And is that a new recording contract that I hear for Danny? Aussie Golden Girl Jen Hawkins. It's ironic because her aura sparkles with golden light. Marriage, I do feel, is a long way off for both her and also Jake. They do share a very strong soulmate connection. That said, later in the year, I do feel they'll have to quash rumours that there's trouble in paradise. But listen to me very carefully. There is not. They are fine. This is a wonderful year for their relationship. In terms of Hollywood, it's an exciting time for Brangelina. That really a wonderful year. It's an exciting time. Go with the flow, not against it. It is my wish to you this year that all your dreams do come true, and may each unfolding moment grant you a miracle.
All right. Oh boy. So sorry, we had a slight technical hitch there, but I think that we're back properly with you now. Some audio problems, never mind. I think it's all good now. So you can imagine I have got hours and hours and hours of that sort of thing to trawl through. And just out of interest, so far, when going through all the predictions in that video clip, there were about 21 predictions made. One is correct. The others can be put into categories, and we'll get to the categories in a minute. When I collect all these predictions, be they radio, be they TV, or they're psychics on YouTube who speak for 2 hours giving predictions, which is pretty hard to get through. Then they are entered into a spreadsheet, which you can see there. And don't worry if you can't see the finer details of that spreadsheet. So we have the year the prediction was made, or for what year the prediction was made, I should say, where it was published, who by whom, or by whom, then where it was published. So in this case, some Brett in this magazine said this. The topic was celebrities, and the verdict, wrong, right, etc. And a bit of a closer up, there's a slightly more up-to-date version. I think you could possibly see some of that. So where the year it was meant to be published, or the year it was predicting, who predicted it, where it was published, the topic, the main subject of the prediction, the prediction itself, and then we get to marking it. And that is quite a process simply to enter the details into this database. It's a very involved, lengthy, time-consuming process, as you can well imagine. And that's not even scoring, not even checking them, and we'll get to that. So I enlisted the help of some friends. So about 5 or 6 years back, for some very pleasant weekends here in Sydney, some of the members of the Australian Skeptics at the time, Alethea Dean there, who was a president. We've got Trish Hand there, who was on our committee, who's a medical professional, and Lara Benham there, who's a teacher, science teacher. And some others would get together in an apartment, and we'd spend weekends on our laptops going through these predictions. We had to discover, here's the prediction, is it right? Did it work? Did this prediction come true? And believe me, that can be very difficult to get to the bottom of some of these predictions sometimes. It's a very involved process, but a lot of it can be quite enjoyable. More recently, over the last year, probably more than a year now, I'd have to ask Susan Gerbic, who's highlighted there. Every week on Wednesday mornings here in Australia, which equates to Tuesday nights in the United States, I and a group of people you can see there, and other people too, meet up on Zoom, and we spend 2 hours going through predictions every week now for a year. And it might give you some clue as the amount of work needed to do this project, because there are approaching, if I'm correct, my latest calculations, I think it's approaching 3,400 predictions we have catalogued. And that alone is a huge amount of work, but then to analyze each prediction is a mammoth undertaking. So here's a little video of our latest session to give you a flavor of what it's like to research predictions. And to give you a little bit of background, we are researching a prediction that was made about a town here in Australia which would suffer house fires. That was the prediction. So let's see if this works. All right. So
anyway, I added a link about the New South Wales annual report.
Yeah.
Did you see that? And they they break down the types of fires, and there's no word house, but there's structure. Structure fires, 5,623.
Wow.
2016, 2017. Then there's outdoor storage. Vehicle fires are 3,270.
Wow. But these are not all in Griffith.
Grass fires, 6,600. I mean, that's ridiculous. All in Griffiths, Griffiths Fire Station. And so that just tells you how ridiculous that is. There was not one notable enough to make the news, and yet there are just so many.
It's
Yeah.
fine, Michelle.
Well, structure Fridays, they were including dog houses, I guess. Too.
Yeah, that includes everything. But if it was a big notable house, that just there's too many for it to make sense, and there's not enough interesting ones to qualify.
Now, that's a great find, actually. I looked at PDF. It's quite amazing. So let's have a look at this one. I don't know. It says, Griffith City, while enormous changes lay ahead for Griffith, that's just what means waffle, the psychic said it would be all for the better. Particularly for the farming industry, this could be a step up. You have had a lot of rain, but it was meant to happen. What the? Because it is going to make the grounds rich and fertile. This is waffle. I got to put this. I really must make a new category called waffle, and that is the most waffly bit of waffle.
Well, as opposed to all of that accidental rain.
Yeah.
All right. So those sessions, they go on for 2 hours every week. And what we were all doing there, we're all looking at our screens for research purposes. We're looking up references, historical references. We're looking up government records when it comes to things like weather and rain. We're looking up local historical records. We're looking up, in that case, fire records. Was there a fire there? And don't, people say Wikipedia is not a reliable resource. Well, it is for everyday mundane things like, did this person get married? How many children did this celebrity have? For things like that, it's fine. But we certainly access a lot of newspapers. We can look up the newspaper reports to check these predictions. And so when we get a prediction and we look at it, we have to decide, is this prediction correct? If it's correct, we'll say it's correct. It's as simple as that. If a psychic said, I see Fred Bloggs being the new president or prime minister, and Fred Bloggs turns out to be the new president or prime minister, then we tick it's correct. Why would we mark it not correct if it's correct? And then there are things like if it's a sporting event and we've got two teams in the grand final or the finals or whatever, and the psychic's predicting one of them to win. Well, this is a 50-50 shot. Now, do we give that the same weight as a prediction which is very unlikely to happen but did happen? It's a 50-50. So we have to consider that. We have to consider whether the prediction made is an event which is widely expected to happen. A good example about that would be a royal baby. When Prince William and Kate married, or Prince Harry, it was widely expected that babies would follow. So to predict that would happen, we'd look at the prediction, but in that sense, we'd probably put it in the expected category. And there are a lot of predictions that are made which we can put in the expected to happen category. Then we can mark some which are simply wrong. If someone's predicted the stock market will go up on a certain day and it went down, it's easy. That's wrong. And they might predict that this celebrity would have 3 children in the next 2 years, and they didn't have any children. Obviously a wrong prediction, so we can mark that in the wrong file. Wrong 50-50. Say they predict the sporting team would win and the sporting team loses. Well, they're wrong, but it was still a 50-50 shot. They're still wrong. Many of the predictions are put into the too vague category. A lot of the predictions talk about changes coming, and many people will feel of benefit, but some people will be left wondering what's happening. Yeah, lots of stuff like that. Or talking about the love life of celebrities. This certain celebrity feels that if she exposes her heart too much, others might think she's flowery, waffly, and if you saw in the video, Adrian from Canada had a big waffle behind her, because a lot of these we call them ourselves, we call them waffle. It's just flowery, waffly. It doesn't say anything. So a lot of them get put in the too vague category. It doesn't really make a solid prediction, but they're still published. Finally, we have unknown. And when this is over, the prediction all marked, and we have a block of unknown, we'll go back and see if we can really get to the bottom. Sometimes it's impossible to know. It might be this celebrity this year, I predict, will turn down 3 contracts. Unless we ask the celebrity, unless this is public knowledge, sometimes we simply cannot know whether this prediction came true or not. We're not saying it's wrong. We just simply have no way of really knowing whether it's true or not. So there's a lot to consider when we're marking each of these predictions. Okay, so some of the topics, and this is only results to date, and we've still got some to do. The project's still going on. It hasn't got long to go, I hope, because after 13 years or, close to 12 years, you can imagine. The number one topic, the number one thing that Australian psychics and mystics predict about are celebrities. No surprise there. So at the moment, the 1,209 predictions made about celebrities, roughly 11% are correct. So close to 90% are anything other than correct, unknown, too vague, wrong. The royals have a lot of predictions made about them, running about 13% correct, as you can see. Politics, who will be the prime minister, who will win this election, who will win that election. That also includes Donald Trump, Barack Obama, American politics, because if a psychic in Australia makes a prediction about the future, about anywhere in the world, we still count it. So there are many predictions there about American politics. And terrorism gets quite a mention there, as you can see. Roughly 7% of those are correct so far. And natural disasters like the next hurricane, the next cyclone, the next tornado, the earthquakes, and so on. 5.6 roughly, more or less. Now, I've made a big note there. It says plus or minus error. And we'll get to this at the end, but I fully realize that by necessity, such a huge project is going to have a margin of error. And that will be something that I will put in the final report, that it cannot be a perfect representation. You know, we're doing the best we can. We're collecting the best we can. We're marking them the best we can. In all honesty, there's obviously going to be a margin of error. We might mark things wrong, which are right, or the wrong, too vague, which are known. And I can only say that after our best efforts, that margin of error may be hovering around the 3 or 4 or 5%, maybe. But there will be some margin of error. So we're not going to say this is an absolute guide. So, so far, the number one person mentioned in predictions is Nicole Kidman. As you can see, some examples there. And so far, and I think maybe there are some more we'll find, but there is roughly 90 predictions, 89 predictions made about Nicole. And so far, 18 of those have been correct. But remember, some of those will be widely expected to happen anyway, but we've marked them correct. A lot of those are too vague to score, and a lot of predictions about Nicole Kidman are simply wrong. She didn't do this. She didn't win this. She didn't move here as predicted. So let's look at some specific examples of prominent psychics here in Australia who are in our database. Simon Turnbull was the president of the Australian Psychics Association for many years. He died in 2014 of a heart attack. I don't think he was a terribly well man towards the end of his life. I knew Simon. I met him on many occasions. We got on. I remember once bending a spoon for him and seeing his brain almost grind to a halt because he saw Uri Geller do it. And he knows Uri Geller was a real psychic and really bent it by mystical means. So to see me do the same thing was amazing. But then he came to the realization that, of course, when I do it, it's a trick. When Uri Geller did it, it was real. So anyway, so in our database, he has 55 catalog predictions, 3 of which are correct. And this guy was the president of the Australian Psychic Association. He would regularly go on TV and whatever. And as a caveat, I will say it's impossible for this project to collect every prediction made in Australia, published in Australia over the last 20 years. We simply couldn't do that. We don't have access to every archive. It's possible that he went on radio and TV many times and those files are simply not available. I didn't see them when they were transmitted. I didn't hear the radio report. I don't know when they were. So you can understand. So this is our best effort to catalog what we can catalog, but regardless. And there's a sort of a more of a graphical representation, a pie chart, with the big tick there saying the ones he actually got right. The big X are simply wrong, wrong, wrong. And the other parts of the pie chart there are the expected. So he would predict something which was widely expected to happen, or he would predict something, and when we'd read it, it was too vague to mark one way or the other. It was, we couldn't nail it down, and a few unknowns. Mitchell Coombs, the man who you saw earlier in the video, who bills himself as Australia's most trusted psychic medium or Australia's favorite celebrity psychic, and so on and so on. So far, we have catalogued 149 of his predictions, and he's running at 19 of those have turned out to be correct. The others falling into the other category, and there's a little representation. The biggest single category there is wrong. Simply, he predicted something which didn't happen, so he got it wrong. And the rest fall into the too vague or expected to happen, and a few unknown there. And another very popular psychic, I don't know if she might have retired by now, Anne, her name is, Anne, who's apparently helps police solve crimes. She was very popular in the magazines for many years. We've got 209 of her predictions catalogued. So far, we've marked 25 of those as correct. And there's her breakdown. So her biggest single slice of the pie chart there is wrong, the big red one. That's all that, the representation of the percentage she's just said, predicted this will happen, and is wrong. And the little tick up there, that thin slice, is the ones where she actually got it right. And we got too vague and expected. I think you can see the trend here. I think you can see that the magic number, if I may put it that way, in this project is roughly, it's 11%, more or less, give or take, of psychic predictions made by psychics. Given if we have enough data, it's about 11% they're running at correct, which means, almost 90% of what they predict doesn't happen. There's some predictions directly from the database made by Anne. It'll give you a little flavor. And yes, I'm a bit biased. I've probably chosen things here that simply didn't happen, but most of what she says doesn't happen. New evidence in the Azaria Chamberlain mystery will emerge. Now, this is, if you remember, this was the dingo stole my baby. That was that story. Azaria Chamberlain disappeared in 1980. And she predicted that an Indigenous man, an Aboriginal man, would hold the key to the disappearance. The dingo didn't take the baby. Well, it's been pretty well established now that really did happen. The dingo did take the baby. Our famous swimmer, Ian Thorpe, her prediction was he would be a one-woman man, lucky girl. He came out some years ago, so that didn't really work out. Predictions made about Catherine Zeta-Jones, which didn't work out. Nicole Kidman and Paul McCartney about his health and X and stuff, which simply didn't happen. But it's important to remember that people don't go back and check these. It really very rarely happens. The Bay Area skeptics are a great example of when it did happen. So these magazines simply hire these people to write columns. They're printed one week. It turns into trash the next week. And it's only people like me who go back and see, did it happen? The magazine doesn't care. They just want some content to fill up their pages every week. It just doesn't matter if it came true or not. It simply doesn't matter. Now, you may think that if you ask your local psychic for the racing tips, you'd be on a sure winner, because if they could see the future, they must know the racing tips. So far, when we look at things like horse racing, out of the 57 predictions made for horse racing and things like that, we have 11 which we could mark correct. A lot of those, though, are very difficult to predict, because they'll say, I see the color blue. Look for a jockey who does this. Or they'll say, the lucky numbers in this race are 6, 12, and 2. And, okay, what does that mean? If one of those wins, that is a true prediction. Well, out of a field of, say, 10 horses, that's a big slice. What if 2 comes second? Is that still a win? It's not as easy as you might think. they do predict deaths, usually elderly celebrities and elderly royals. So far in the database, of the 26 times they've predicted the death of a celebrity, one has died in the year they said predicted. So if you want to live longer, have a psychic predict your death, I think. What we've discovered in many, many hours of pouring through these predictions, if you want to be a successful psychic in the prediction game, make many predictions. Make as many as you possibly can churn out and keep most of them vague and ethereal. And then sprinkle those with some very precise predictions. And when occasionally your very precise predictions come true, which they must if you make a lot of them, if you make a lot of predictions in general, then that's the ones you point out and you say, I predicted this would happen. And all the other ones are forgotten, especially by the media, because the story is this psychic got it right. That's all they're interested in. And we see that again and again. So far in our project, with over, there you are. In fact, since I wrote this slide, I've discovered some more. So we are approaching 3,400 predictions. We're running at the correct rate. The correct number is about 334, and the rest, including wrong, too vague, unknown, expected, is 2,774. And there's that magic number again. Roughly, give or take, taking into consideration margins of error, it is running at 11%, and it has been running at roughly 11% since I started this project over 10 years ago. The more predictions that are added to the project, the more this 11% correct margin is evident. And there's just a graphical representation of the project as a whole with over 3,000 predictions. And as you can see, the wrong category, certainly the biggest category, followed then by the too vague. The ones that it's just waffle, as we call it, or we can't nail it down, or it could be, sometimes it could be seen as contradictory, too vague. And the correct there, roughly, this stage it was 10.9. As you can see, we're working around the 11% margin. So some years back, about 4 years back, 5 years back, I decided that this project needed a control group. We needed something to bounce it off. So I asked a whole lot of skeptics and other people simply to write their top predictions for the year 2017. And I made, I didn't ask psychics. I said just everyday people in the skeptics, people here, people whatever, people who were interested. So we collected 164 predictions, and we were running at 31% correct. Now, I think if we did this every year, so if I did this alongside the predictions since the year 2000, eventually that would probably shake down to, yes, more or less 11%. But it's only 1 year. It's only 163. So we get that statistical anomaly. But I think it shows that it's entirely possible for anybody to get a reasonable score in this prediction game. And there's just a little slice of the database there showing you that part with my own predictions. At the beginning of 2017 or late 2016, I wrote down all these predictions for the year ahead, 2017, and I scored very well. I remember one of the predictions I made was what football team would be in the final competition, in the final game of the year, what we call the grand final. Think of the Super Bowl, 2 teams. So I put in front of me little bits of paper with every team in the competition. I mixed them all up and I held up one at random and I made that my prediction, and they were in the final. I thought that was quite a good prediction. So another very important part of this project, we are also cataloging 10 events, historical events that happened in each year of the prediction. So 2000, 2001, 2002, which were not predicted. And in our opinion, they should have been. If these psychics could see in the future, they should have seen this. And we hope to have about 200 instances of things that they didn't see, which they should have seen, including things like the Concorde crashing or the 9/11 terrorist attacks. That's actually contested. There is a psychic here in Australia who says he did predict that, but I can't get the original source. Here's an important thing to say, that in order for us to accept a prediction into the database, I need to have the original published prediction, not the retelling of it, not a report 2 years later saying this is what I predicted in hindsight. And this one is contested. It's difficult. I can't get to the original source, but maybe we can find out more about that. But things like Facebook. Now, Facebook is one of the biggest things that has ever hit our society. Love it or hate it, it's true. And you would think that years before, this sort of thing would have been foreseen. We have various natural disasters there. And leading up through the teens, the 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, why weren't there people talking about the future president, Donald Trump? It just was not predicted, And of course, the biggest change to our society in the last 2 years, and probably one of the biggest things in the last century, COVID-19. Now, there are various people, various psychics who say they predicted COVID-19, but when we've checked, to be blunt, spoiler alert, they didn't do that. You think they would have. And it's a little difficult to see, but I'll zoom in a moment. That is some of the workings in the database of what they didn't see coming. I think I've got a better, there we go. So this is a work in progress. As you can see, we have the year this event happened, the topic, what it was, a terrorism. There we are, terrorism in New Zealand near the top, and the date and the event. And we look in the database, was this predicted? If it wasn't, then we enter into this part. So that'll make a big part of the report, saying all these events were not foreseen. And they should have been. If these psychics can really see the future, they should have foreseen all these events happening. I expect when this is published, me personally and the team will probably get these following criticisms. Psychics will tell us, you did not take all of my predictions into account. They'll say, we cherry-picked. And what we would say to that is, well, we've done our damnedest. You know, we have trolled everything we can possibly get. And if we find a prediction you made is correct, it's in the database as correct. We're not going to fudge that. If you've made more predictions we didn't have access to or we didn't find, then we will incorporate them. You know, we'll update the project. And then I can imagine that they'd send us only the ones they got right. There's the second point. You only chose the predictions that were wrong and ignored the ones that were right. So we will be, I'm sure, accused of cherry picking. And we've gone to great pains not to do that. And another criticism probably going to be leveled towards us is, well, these predictions made in the women's magazine, they're just for entertainment. No one takes them seriously. To that we say, well, these psychics don't say they do it for entertainment. These psychics say they are the real deal. They are paid to predict the future. It's not up to us to call them entertainers or whatever. They promote themselves as having genuine psychic power. So every published psychic prediction to us is valid for this database. Now, we'd probably get the criticism. Of course, the skeptics would reach the conclusion that psychics cannot see the future. They are biased. You know, of course, it's a skeptic project. Well, to that, we'd say that, again, every effort has been made to fairly and squarely score the predictions. If they're right, they're right. If they're wrong, they're wrong. I mean, usually there's not too much to talk about there. It's either right or wrong. But we get into the messy category of, is this too vague or not? And that can be open to interpretation. But of course, what we might say then is, well, you are now welcome to also come up with a database of 3,000 plus predictions and mark them yourself, and we'll compare notes later. I don't think they'd be willing to spend 10 years doing that. The psychics would not produce a report confirming that psychics can see into the future. That might be a criticism. Well, if that's what the data says, if that's what the data said, that 75% of the psychics' predictions came true, that's what we would publish. I don't know what conclusions we'd draw from that if that was the case, but we'd certainly publish it and say this was far beyond what we'd expect statistically. As it happens, it hasn't happened. And all this work, this decade plus work, won't change anything. Psychics will still appear on TV and magazines. They won't care. Well, yes, we're not expecting TV shows and magazines to suddenly drop all their psychics. That's not what we're expecting. But there will be a huge database, referenced database people can refer to, the media, whatever, to see that this research has been carried out. And skeptics aren't just sitting back in their armchairs saying, oh, I don't think psychics can see the future. We'll have a database to back up our conclusions. Now, Captain, you cannot change the laws of physics. There's one of the things that crossed my mind. If psychics can see into the future, then what they're receiving is information being sent from the future into the past. From the future's point of view, we are living in the past. And as far as we possibly know, information cannot be sent into the past. So you can go into the future. Relativity shows us that you can sort of go into the future. I do that every time I fly in a plane because I'm traveling faster relatively to the people on the ground. It's nanoseconds. It doesn't really count. But that's sort of traveling into the future. And if you travel near the speed of light, that sort of thing can happen. But you can't take information now and then send it back 3 years ago. As far as we know, that simply can't happen. But then the psychics will say, oh, yes, but this all happens on the paranormal and spiritual plane. It's different. Now, when they say that, that's just there's nothing there we can say to counter that. Really, it's just made up. There's no laws of physics behind it. There's no science behind it. They can say whatever they like. They can say, it's spiritual. That's how it happens. It's a get out of jail free card. Well, for a lot of people, that's a get out of jail free card. So I hope to present a similar report to this, for our Skeptics Convention coming up in November, late November, where I hope to give the conclusions, which will be more or less what you've seen today of this project, and maybe some more information along there as well. I hope you can join us for the Australian Skeptics National Convention. You can find out more information at skeptics.com.au. And I encourage you to listen to my podcast, the Skeptic Zone podcast at skepticzone.tv, which comes out every week. There we go. Shameless plug. But for now, while I finish off my glass of water, thank you very much for listening to me and peering into the future.
Well, and thank you, Richard. That was excellent as usual. We've come to expect that from you, of course. And that wasn't a shameless plug. This is your thing, man. I mean, plug all you want, and that's great. But yeah, so I think we're gonna have some questions, and I got to start one. I got to start this thing off right now, Richard, and I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna use that nasty 3-letter question that's always asked of us skeptics. What's the harm, Richard? I mean, is it really that big a deal? I mean, these are psychics. It's kind of entertainment, it kind of makes us feel good. It's kind of like reading your astrology chart. What's the deal? I mean, is it really that harmful?
I guess, of all the things that we look at and investigate, these psychics who write for magazines and appear on the TV shows at the end of the year are on the lower end of what's the harm. They really are, because a lot of people watch that for the 5 minutes of entertainment they get out of it, and they won't even think about it again. But it's sort of like the thin end of the wedge, because then people may get sucked into thinking these people can really see the future. And if they can see the future, then they can see their future. And maybe they can advise them about the next property investment to buy, or the next who they should marry, or what they should do with their life, And that's where you could get into situations where unqualified people are giving financial advice based on the premise that they can see the future and they can direct your income and do that and whatever. It's a tough question to answer because I think that people who claim to have medical powers probably do more harm than these psychics who simply provide entertainment by looking into the future. But it's a difficult question to give you a good answer to, I must admit.
No, that's actually a very good answer, and so I've got another question for you. This is from Arbrador. I'm doing the best I can with that. What real consequences do psychic predictions have? For example, if psychics predict Gavin Newsom will be recalled as governor of California, are pro-Newsom voters discouraged from voting no?
Possibly. Yeah, I could imagine that some psychic giving a prediction about an important upcoming event could sway some people one way or the other. Whether that would be the cause for the whole thing going one way or the other is debatable. It's conceivable. It could happen. There could be enough people, if it's very tight, who are swayed by a psychic saying you must do this. But we're swayed by all sorts of people when it comes to political contests, celebrities especially giving endorsements or whatever, telling us do that, vote this way, vote that way. Again, I don't think I can give you a good answer to that. It's conceivable it could happen.
Do you follow up on that? Do you think that are these psychics actually giving instructions? I mean, I usually my experience with psychics is they just say a lot of interesting things, and some of them are provocative and some of them aren't particularly interesting. Are some of them actually saying you need to do this? Or
yes. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, people go for private readings with the understanding that the psychic will give them advice about the future because the psychic can see the future. So people have made investments and life decisions based on the advice given to them by a psychic, with the understanding this psychic can foresee the future and tell them what to do. Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know what? That could, in some situations, turn out to be good advice. It could, but it's not based on anything real. Sometimes they'll give good advice. Sometimes they'll give bad advice. It's just better not to go there in the first place, I would say.
I think you just answered my what's the harm question.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. All right, we have another question from Jay. All right, from the Bay Area Skeptics. Won't some people say that 11% correct means that there is something there? Are you validating them with this work?
Well, given that a group of skeptics got 31%, no, but in all honesty, it was clear to me from a decade ago that, and as I said in my presentation, if you make enough predictions, some of them have to come true. You can't make hundreds of predictions and have everyone wrong. It's not possible. If you make enough predictions about future events, about people, about whatever, some of them will have to come true. It's like rolling a 30-sided die and saying this die will never come up 3, and rolling it 100 times or 200 or 300. Sometimes it's going to come up. It's just statistically it's going to happen. And for some reason, 10, remember, we got margins of error here. So it could be 9, 10, 11, 12, something like that are correct. And that just has to happen.
And Jay's follow-up question is, doesn't 31% for the control group mean that everybody has psychic powers?
Believe it or not, this was put to me by a psychic once. I said that in our control group we got much better. They said, you see, they're psychic and they don't know it. But as I said before, if that's based on a small sample size, and when you base things on small sample sizes, you'll get statistical anomalies, which will flatten out the more data you collect.
We got another question. I'm very glad to see some names that I don't recognize. That's really cool. It means a lot of people are watching this, and I appreciate that. Thank you all for tuning in. Howard Winnett says, have any prognosticators predicted their fail rates? I think that's actually a very good question.
Yes, and it doesn't relate directly to this project, but when in certain situations, I've been testing people for the $100,000 prize money in Australia, or for James Randi for the $1 million prize. We would sometimes get the situation where the psychic would say, "Okay, I'll try. I don't think I'll pass, but I'll try." What, you've predicted your own failure before you started. It's fascinating. And if they fail, they say, "You see, I was right." And if they pass, they say, "You see, I got it." It's what we say, having a bob each way. It's having a bet. No matter what the outcome, they can say they're correct. See, I said I predicted I would fail, and I failed. Therefore, I'm correct.
They could make a lot more money as hedge fund managers.
I think so.
To me.
Yeah.
All right, we got another good question again from Jay. Thank you. After looking at thousands of predictions, do you have favorites?
Yeah.
Ones that have been particularly unusual or funny?
Oh, sure. And I think one of the things I'll have to do is.
I assume he means that came true, right? I mean, that would be more interesting.
I think. Towards the end of the project, I'll have to spend a day with the team, and we can make a subcategory of the more hilarious ones. I think one of the best examples of that is somebody predicted the subject was the presidential elections of 2020. And their prediction was that either Donald Trump or Joe Biden would win.
When did they predict that?
That would be, they predicted that in October or November, I think. So,
that's quite profound. Yes, that's kind of amazing.
Can't touch
that. Well, in 1981, I predicted that Indiana University would win the championship. But then I'm a graduate of Indiana University, so I probably had a little bias. I probably thought that anyway. But I was right about that one. I got that one right. Are there any more questions from Jay or from anyone? Let's see, because I do want to I want to. It looks like we're coming to the close here, and it is kind of late. So I want to thank you, Richard. It is always a pleasure to have you on. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. You always bring something interesting and fun, and I just love what you're doing. I'm glad that I don't have to do it. It looks like a lot of trouble, but I do appreciate that.
Yeah, I can tell you, I had no idea when I started this project. It was only going to be for 1 year. Then it was 2, then it was 3, then it was 10, and then I thought, okay, just go for it. 20-year period. But I did make the hard decision that after 20 years, I'm not even looking at predictions now for 2021 or 22. I don't care. I don't want to know. I've already got enough. But it's a pleasure to see you, Bill. We've had some great times together in California. And I particularly remember with fondness the day we were both at the Solano Stroll, having a great day there, manning the little tent there for the Bay Area Skeptics. That was a great deal of fun.
That was great. I hope we can do that again.
Me too.
COVID, I hope we can get back there and do some more of that stuff. So, I do want to promo next week's Skept Talk. Oh, wait a minute, it's not a Skept Talk. We've got something big. Next month, I should say. In October, there will not be a Skept Talk because we have our big conference. The Bay Area Skeptics and the Sacramento Area Skeptics will be hosting Skeptical, which is back. After 10 straight conferences, wonderful conferences being held in Northern California. This one's going to be online, of course. Okay, but in October 23rd and 24th, that's Saturday and Sunday, we're going to be a host. Skeptical is going to be back. We're going to have our 11th Skeptical. We've got some wonderful speakers. We have Elizabeth Loftus, the memory expert from Cal Irvine, who did the famous Lost in the Shopping Mall experiment. We have Britt Hermes, you can look her up. She was a naturopath who decided that, to put it rather delicately, naturopathy wasn't all that it was cracked up to be, and so she now speaks out against that. We have Paul Offit, infectious disease expert Paul Offit is coming to give us a talk. We have blogger Thomas Westbrook has been confirmed. It's going to be awesome, and we have Oh yeah, me, Skepperty is going to be back. We've done Skepperty 2 years. Richard Saunders is of course an alumni of Skepperty, and I'll be hosting Skepperty. It'll be the skeptical form of Jeopardy, and we'll do that. All this is going to be online. If you want to know more, go to skepticalcon.com. That's a little hard. Skepticalcon with an M.com with an M. Did I say that right? Anyway, that's next month, October 23rd and 24th. Please go to the website, skeptical.com, buy tickets. It's going to be really, really incredible. It's all online, but it's still going to be amazing. And I'm sure Richard is going to buy a ticket for us. And
I wouldn't miss it. And again, some of my happiest memories of being at that convention, just being in the Bay Area in general. I miss everybody. I miss Jeannie Scott. I miss seeing people like you and all my friends there. So as we skeptics say, fingers crossed that next year things will be different.
Indeed. And thank you again, Richard. It was a pleasure. Again, always good to have you. And I know we're going to have you on again, and I look forward to that as well. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And to all the rest of our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. I thought this one was a great one. We've had some great Skep Talks. We'll have another one in November after Skeptical. But other than that, I'd like to bid you all good night.